You're in the middle of a sentence. It's a good one, a story you've told a dozen times, the kind that makes your granddaughter's eyes light up. You're describing the little bakery you used to visit as a child? The one with the blue, peeling paint on the door and the smell of warm bread and cinnamon that would hit you from a block away? You can see it in your mind's eye, perfect and clear. The flour dust on the floorboards, the bell that jingled when you walked in. You can almost taste the sticky sugar on the morning buns. And then you get to the name. The name of the kind old woman who ran the shop, who always gave you a broken cookie for free. Her name was Mrs. And it's gone. It's not just fuzzy, not hiding on the tip of your tongue. It is a hole. A perfect, smooth-walled void where a cherished memory used to be. Your mouth is still open, poised to form the word, but your brain has sent back a silent error message. File not found. The connection is severed. For a brief, hopeful second, you try to play it off. You let out a little chuckle, a light, airy sound that feels like a betrayal in your own ears. Oh, goodness, what was her name? It'll come to me in a moment. But it doesn't. The void remains. And as you look at your granddaughter, her bright, expectant smile faltering with a flicker of confusion, a different feeling begins to creep in. A cold, metallic dread that starts in your stomach and spreads through your chest, tightening its grip. Your mind, which was just moments ago painting a vibrant picture of the past, is now racing in a terrifying new direction. It's scrambling, no longer for the name, but for an explanation for this sudden failure. And it lands on the one you fear most. Is this it? Is this the moment it begins? Not the gentle, forgivable forgetting of where you put your keys or why you walked into a room, but the real thing, the beginning of the unraveling. In that split second, you see a flash of a future you've desperately pushed to the back of your mind. The sterile light of doctors' offices, the strained, worried looks from your children, the slow, heartbreaking fade of the person you've spent a lifetime becoming. Every news article you've skimmed about brain health, every friend's parent you've watched decline, it all rushes into that one silent, awful moment. The blank isn't just an empty space anymore. In your mind, it feels like a diagnosis, a verdict delivered without a trial. This feeling of absolute betrayal by the very mind that holds all your stories, all your loves, all of your life, it is one of the most terrifying experiences a person can have. It is a profound and intensely lonely fear that what's happening is a one-way street, that a switch has been flipped somewhere deep inside and there is no turning back. You feel helpless, a passenger in your own body, watching a part of yourself simply vanish without warning or reason. If you have ever felt a moment like that sudden, shocking, terrifying blank where a piece of your own world should be, then you know that the immediate assumption is almost always the same. We assume it's a disease of the brain. We assume it's the beginning of the long goodbye of dementia. But what if that powerful, gut-wrenching assumption, the one that causes so much immediate fear and despair, is wrong? What if that blank space isn't a sign of your brain breaking down, but a side effect of something else entirely? Something that was prescribed to you with the very best of intentions, but is now silently, insidiously stealing your thoughts? That fear is real. And it deserves a real evidence-based answer, not just a leap to the worst-case scenario. I'm Dr. Dean. And for more than 2 decades as a physician, I've seen that exact story play out more times than I can count. I've sat across from patients and their worried families, and I have felt the weight of that fear in the room. It's a fear that the medical system, in its rush to diagnose and label, can sometimes magnify instead of soothe. My mission here on this channel is to help you navigate that system with a different perspective. We call it the longevity lens. It's a simple but powerful idea that the goal of medicine, especially after 60, isn't just to treat numbers on a lab report or to extend a timeline. The true goal is to protect and enhance your quality of life. It's to ensure that the person you've become, with all your memories, your wisdom, and your connections, remains vibrant and whole for as long as possible. That terror you feel when your memory fails you is entirely valid. It's the fear of losing yourself. And when that happens, the immediate leap to a diagnosis like dementia is understandable. It's the story we've all been told. It's the conclusion our culture has conditioned us to expect. It's the path of least resistance for a healthcare system built on pattern recognition. But looking through the longevity lens forces us to pause. It requires us to challenge that first terrifying assumption. It demands that we ask a quieter, more careful question before we accept a life-altering diagnosis. We must look at the entire picture of a person's health, not just the single frightening symptom. So let me state the thesis of this entire video as clearly as I can. That terrifying moment of blankness, that void where a memory should be, is very often not a disease of your brain. It is a side effect of a pill you take every single day. I understand how radical that might sound. In a world where every symptom is given a name, a code, and a diagnosis, suggesting the cause might be the treatment itself can feel like heresy. But the simple and often overlooked truth is that the medications that have kept you healthy for years, the ones for your blood pressure, your cholesterol, your anxiety, or even just a simple over-the-counter sleep aid, can have a profound and cumulative impact on your cognition as you age. These medications are not villains. They are complex characters in the story of your health. The doctor who prescribed them did so with the best of intentions to solve a clear and present problem. They were prescribed to protect your heart, to help you get restful sleep, to keep your bladder under control. And for a long time, they likely did their job perfectly, becoming a trusted, invisible part of your daily routine. But here is the critical piece of what I call forbidden knowledge, the information the system often fails to communicate. The rules change over time. Your body at 70 is not the same as it was at 50. Your metabolism is different. Your liver and kidneys, the body's clearing crew, work at a more deliberate pace. A dose that was once a perfect therapeutic fit can, over years, begin to accumulate, reaching levels that start to interfere with the delicate chemistry of your brain. The math simply changes. This isn't a conspiracy. It's a systemic blind spot, a flaw in the logic of modern medicine. It is far easier and faster in a 15-minute appointment to attribute a new symptom like confusion to a new disease like dementia than it is to undertake the difficult, time-consuming work of questioning a long-standing medication that seems to be working. This creates a terrible trap where the cure for one problem becomes the silent cause of a new, far more frightening one. The medicine, our intended hero, becomes an accidental antagonist, and no one even thinks to suspect it. And that is why we're having this conversation today. Because untangling this complex relationship between the pills in your cabinet and the thoughts in your head is one of the most powerful acts of self-advocacy you can perform. It's about reclaiming the possibility that your mind is not failing. It might just be caught in the crossfire of well-intentioned medicine. So let's pull back the curtain. So to do that, we need a clear and steady roadmap. Here is my promise to you for the rest of this video. First, we will systematically uncover the 5 most common classes of drugs that can create a fog over your memory. I'm not just going to list them. For each one, we'll explore the evidence from respected medical journals and official guidelines, so you know this isn't just one doctor's opinion. I'll explain the mechanism, the why, behind how a pill designed to help one part of your body can inadvertently cloud your mind. Second, to make this real, I'll share anonymized stories from my own practice. You'll see how this plays out not in a textbook, but in the lives of people just like you, who felt that same cold dread of a memory blank and found an unexpected answer. And finally, and this is the most important part, I will not leave you with information that creates more worry. We will end with a clear, actionable plan. I will give you an empowering tool, the 5 specific questions to ask your doctor to determine if your medications could be the real culprit. This is about turning that helpless feeling into agency and that fear into a focused, productive conversation. The list we're about to go through is crucial because some of these drugs are hiding in plain sight. They are so common, so trusted, that the idea they could be involved feels almost impossible. And as we go through this list, I want you to pay special attention to 2 of them because they are masters of disguise. The third one in particular has stopped many people in their tracks when I've discussed it in my clinic. It involves a medication that millions of people, perhaps even you, take every single day to protect their heart. A drug that is seen as a modern medical triumph, a cornerstone of cardiovascular health, yet for a vulnerable subset of patients, it can subtly dim the lights on their cognition, creating a fog that's almost impossible to attribute to the pill itself. Then there's the final one we'll cover, number 5. This one is perhaps the most difficult of all. It's a medication for a type of chronic pain, and it has a particularly insidious way of stealing your focus. It creates a tragic catch-22 that can force people to choose between living with physical agony or living with a clouded mind, a choice no one should ever have to make. These are the hidden connections we need to uncover. But before we begin with the first drug on our list, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the feeling that brought you here today. That isolating moment of fear is a powerful and often private experience. The truth, however, is that you are far from alone in feeling it. I want to ask you something directly, and I'd be grateful if you'd take a moment to answer. It's a simple question. Have you ever had a moment of memory loss, a blank space like the one we described, that truly, deeply scared you? If the answer is yes, I invite you to do something very simple. Just go down to the comment section and type the word yes. You don't need to share your story unless you feel comfortable doing so. Yes. The reason I ask is not for me. It's for the person who will come to this video after you, feeling that same private, isolating terror. When they scroll down and see a long, quiet list of people saying yes, they will understand, maybe for the first time, that they are not broken, that their fear is a shared experience. They will know they are not alone. This space we're building is a community, a place where we can see our own experiences reflected in others, and that act alone can be incredibly powerful. I'll be reading through them myself. Now, once we recognize that we aren't alone in this experience, the next critical step is to give it a proper name. Not a diagnosis, but a name. Because when we can name something, we can separate it from the big, scary labels. We can begin to understand it, and that is where our power to act truly begins. So let's define what we're actually talking about. Let's call it medication fog. Medication fog is not a formal medical diagnosis you'll find in a textbook. It's a practical name for a very real and crucially reversible state of cognitive impairment caused by the side effects of a drug. It's that mental cloudiness, the slow processing, that frustrating empty blank where a name used to be. It feels like dementia, but it isn't. The act of naming it this way is incredibly important. It's a strategic move. When we hear the words early dementia, we unconsciously accept a diagnosis. It feels like a verdict, a permanent, progressive disease of the brain that becomes part of our identity. But when we call it medication fog, we do something powerful. We reframe it. It's no longer an internal failure, it's an external influence. It becomes a temporary condition that, if correctly identified, can be lifted. The fog can clear. It separates the problem from the person. So the critical question is, why does this happen? Why does a medication you've taken safely for a decade suddenly start to cause this fog? The answer isn't that your brain is broken. It's that the very systems responsible for processing and clearing these medications from your body have changed with time. To truly understand this, we need to look at the first fundamental reason older adults are more susceptible. It starts with the simple, unavoidable fact that your body's internal clearing crew just doesn't work as fast as it used to. First, we have to understand the body as a brilliant but aging processing plant. Every medication you take is a substance that your body must metabolize and eventually clear out. The two main organs responsible for this, your clearing crew, are the liver and the kidneys. When you're younger, this system is incredibly efficient. A dose of medication is processed and removed from your system on a predictable schedule. But as we age, a universal and completely normal change occurs. The function of our liver and kidneys begins to slow down. It's not a sign of disease, it's simply a part of the aging process. The clearing crew, once a team of sprinters, now works at the steady pace of marathon runners. Think about it this way. A dose of a medication that was perfectly safe and effective for you at 50 can become a mild chronic overdose by the time you're 75. Not because the pill has changed, but because your body's ability to clear it out has. The drug stays in your system longer, and its concentration in your bloodstream can creep up, day by day, year by year, until it reaches a level that is significantly higher than what your doctor originally intended. This slow accumulation is the first step towards medication fog. At these higher concentrations, a drug can begin to exert side effects it never caused before. It starts to affect tissues and organs it previously left untouched, including the most sensitive and complex organ of all, your brain. This buildup of chemical influence is the first part of the problem. But it's only half of the equation. Because it's not just that there's more of the medication circulating in your body. At the very same time, the natural defenses that protect your brain are also changing, making it far more vulnerable to that chemical influence. And understanding the second piece of the puzzle is absolutely critical. Second, your brain's own dedicated security system becomes less strict over time. It's called the blood-brain barrier. Think of it as an incredibly selective gatekeeper designed to protect your brain's delicate environment from stray chemicals, toxins, and anything else circulating in your bloodstream. In your younger years, this barrier is robust. It keeps most medications, especially those not designed to work on the brain, safely locked out. But as we age, this barrier can become more permeable. It gets a little leaky. Now, combine this with what we just discussed, the higher concentration of medication lingering in your system. You now have more of the drug circulating and a security gate that is more likely to let it pass through into the brain's control center. A blood pressure pill that was harmless to your brain at 55 can now slip past the gatekeeper at 75 and start to interfere with the complex signaling of your neurons. This is where the medication fog truly sets in. The brain, now exposed to a chemical it was never meant to encounter, starts to malfunction. Signals get crossed. Memories become harder to retrieve. And this creates the perfect storm for a devastating medical mistake. Because when a doctor sees this new confusion or memory loss, their training often doesn't lead them to suspect the heart medication. It leads them to diagnose a new brain problem. And this triggers a terrible, predictable, and often dangerous domino effect, a process so common it has its own name, the prescribing cascade. Third, we arrive at the most critical principle, because this is where the system itself can inadvertently turn against you. This is the mechanism that can take a simple, reversible side effect and transform it into a devastating, life-altering diagnosis. And it works like this. A medication, let's call it drug A, is prescribed for a legitimate reason, say high blood pressure. Over time, as we've discussed, it begins to build up in your system and crosses the leaky blood-brain barrier, causing a new side effect, confusion and memory lapses. This is the first domino. You, quite rightly, report this to your doctor. The doctor, seeing a new cognitive symptom in an older adult, follows their training. The most obvious diagnosis isn't a side effect from a 10-year-old heart medication. It's the onset of dementia. This is the second domino, the misinterpretation of the symptom. And this leads to the third and most damaging domino, a new prescription. The doctor prescribes drug B, a medication for dementia, to treat the new diagnosis. Now you are taking a pill to treat the side effect of another pill. This is the essence of the prescribing cascade. And it rarely stops there. The new medication, drug B, has its own set of side effects, perhaps dizziness or nausea, which can then be mistaken for yet another new problem, leading to a prescription for drug C. A person can quickly find themselves on a cocktail of medications, caught in a downward spiral that started with a single unrecognized side effect. This is not the fault of one doctor. It is a flaw in the logic of a system that is far better at adding treatments than it is at subtracting causes. Each step is logical, well-intentioned, and follows standard practice. But the cumulative effect can be catastrophic. The prescribing cascade is a trap woven with good intentions, where the very act of seeking help can make the problem profoundly worse. So how do we dismantle this cascade? We have to go back to the beginning. We have to learn to identify that very first domino. We need to know which medications are the most common culprits for creating medication fog in the first place. And that brings us to our first and perhaps most notorious class of drugs. They are called anticholinergics. It's a technical name, but what's important is understanding what they do and where they hide in plain sight. You'll find them in many common over-the-counter allergy and sleep aids, specifically ones containing diphenhydramine. They are also the key ingredient in many prescription drugs for an overactive bladder or irritable bowel syndrome, and even in some older types of antidepressants. These drugs work by blocking a vital neurotransmitter in your brain called acetylcholine. Think of acetylcholine as the brain's dedicated librarian. It's absolutely essential for learning and for filing and retrieving memories. Anticholinergic drugs essentially tell that librarian to step away from the desk. When acetylcholine is blocked, new memories struggle to be filed correctly, and accessing old ones becomes a frustrating, often futile effort. The result isn't always a dramatic, sudden blankness. More often, it's a slow, creeping cognitive decline that families tragically mistake for something else entirely. It's a story I've seen play out countless times, but one case has always stayed with me. It's the story of Dorothy, a woman whose family was absolutely convinced they were watching her disappear into dementia. Dorothy was 72, and she was, in her own words, a force of nature. She managed the finances for her local church, ran a fiercely competitive book club, and could tell you the Latin name for every single plant in her sprawling, magnificent garden. Her mind wasn't just sharp, it was a beautifully curated library of facts, stories, and connections. But over the course of about 6 months, her family started to notice the library was closing. It began subtly. She'd lose her place mid-sentence, not in the normal way, but with a look of genuine bewilderment, as if the path she was walking on had simply crumbled away. She started missing her church finance meetings, something that would have been unthinkable a year prior. At her book club, she, who had always led the discussions with incisive commentary, grew quiet, unable to follow the arguments. Her daughter found a half-finished crossword puzzle on the kitchen table, a puzzle Dorothy would have normally finished in an hour, abandoned for days. The family was terrified. They did what any loving family would do. They took her to her primary care doctor. After a brief cognitive screen and a review of her symptoms, the doctor delivered the news with a heavy heart. "It looks like the early stages of dementia," he said. The words landed like a physical blow. The family saw her future collapsing into that one devastating diagnosis. Plans were made. Difficult conversations were had. A cloud of grief settled over their home. It was in this state of despair that her daughter brought her to see me for a second opinion. And as is my practice with every new older patient, we did a simple but critical exercise, a brown bag review. I asked her daughter to bring in every single pill Dorothy was taking, prescription and over-the-counter. As we lined up the bottles on the exam table, one stood out to me. It was a medication she had been on for nearly a decade for an overactive bladder. It was an older drug, a powerful anticholinergic. It had worked well for her for years, becoming such a part of her routine that no one, not even her doctor, ever thought to question it. But I knew that for a woman in her 70s, a dose that was safe at 62 could now be profoundly toxic to her brain. I explained the concept of medication fog to her daughter. I explained how this one pill, designed to calm her bladder, could be silencing her mind by blocking that crucial neurotransmitter, acetylcholine. There was a flicker of hope in her eyes, mixed with a healthy dose of skepticism. Could it really be that simple? We devised a plan with her primary doctor. It wasn't about stopping the medication cold. Instead, we started a careful, supervised process of tapering her off the old drug while introducing a newer alternative with a much lower anticholinergic burden. We also discussed behavioral strategies to help manage her bladder symptoms. For the first 2 weeks, nothing changed. The family's hope began to wane. But then, in the 3rd week, her daughter called me. She was crying, but this time they were tears of joy. "She finished the crossword puzzle," she said. "The one that's been on the table for a month? She just picked it up and finished it." Over the next month, Dorothy came back. The fog lifted, not all at once, but like a morning mist burning off in the sun. The quick wit returned. She started correcting her son-in-law on the historical inaccuracies in a movie they were watching. She rejoined her book club and, to the astonishment of her friends, gave a brilliant, detailed analysis of the novel's central theme. She wasn't just better, she was herself again. Dorothy's story is a profound illustration of the power of looking at the full picture. She didn't have a disease of the brain. She had a reversible drug-induced cognitive impairment, a classic case of medication fog. Her happy ending, however, shouldn't be seen as a miraculous, one-off event. It was the direct result of applying a principle that is well-known, well-documented, and enshrined in the official safety guidelines created for the specific purpose of preventing stories exactly like hers. The information to protect Dorothy was already there, hiding in plain sight. This isn't just my clinical opinion. It is a textbook case of a danger that has been officially recognized for years by the most respected authorities in geriatric medicine. In the United States, the American Geriatric Society publishes a crucial document known as the Beers Criteria. You can think of it as the gold standard, an evidence-based do not prescribe if possible list for older adults. It is the medical community's official guide to avoiding medications where the risks are likely to outweigh the benefits as we age. And strong anticholinergic drugs are featured prominently on that list. The recommendation is unequivocal. Avoid them whenever safer alternatives exist. And this consensus isn't confined to one country. Similar warnings are issued by the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, or NICE, in the United Kingdom, and echoed by health authorities in Canada and Australia. The global medical community is speaking with one voice on this issue. This unified warning is built on a mountain of research, including a landmark 2015 study in the prestigious journal JAMA Internal Medicine. It wasn't a small trial. It followed nearly 3,500 people over 7 years to track the long-term effects of these drugs. The researchers discovered a direct dose-dependent link. The more anticholinergic medication a person took, and the longer they took it, the higher their subsequent risk of developing dementia became. It's one thing to be told a medication has an increased risk. That's an abstract concept. It's another thing entirely to see that risk quantified in stark, unambiguous numbers. The study didn't just find a vague connection, it calculated the odds. And when you see just how heavily these drugs can load the dice against you, the abstract warning becomes a very real and personal threat. The JAMA study found that individuals with the highest cumulative use of these strong anticholinergic drugs had a nearly 50% increased risk of developing dementia compared to those who took none. Let's break down what high cumulative use means because it's critical. It's not about taking one pill one time. Researchers calculated it as the equivalent of taking a standard dose of one of these drugs every single day for more than 3 years. For many people on long-term prescriptions, that milestone passed a long time ago. Now, let's absorb what that 50% number truly means. This isn't a minor statistical fluctuation. It is a seismic shift in your future odds. To make this tangible, I want you to visualize something. Imagine a community hall filled with 100 people, all in their late 60s, all of whom have been on one of these drugs long-term. Based on this evidence, for a significant number of people in that room, dozens of them, the dice are now loaded. Their path, which might have otherwise been clear of dementia, now has a major medically induced obstacle placed directly in its way. It means that a future diagnosis, a diagnosis that will be attributed to age or genetics or just bad luck, could in fact be the final invoice for a medication taken years earlier. This is the very definition of a tragedy because it's so often preventable. The person who receives that life-altering dementia diagnosis 5 or 10 years from now will never know. Their family will never know. Their doctor might never connect the dots back to a prescription from a decade ago. The true cause, the slow, cumulative poisoning of the brain's memory centers by an anticholinergic drug, will remain a ghost in their medical history. The medication fog will have become a permanent, irreversible storm, and no one will remember that it started with a single pill. Now, hearing this, the natural response is to feel a sense of alarm, perhaps even frustration. But I want to be very clear. This information is not meant to paralyze you with fear. It is meant to arm you. It is meant to empower you. Because understanding this risk is the essential first step toward choosing a different path. This is not a dead end. And for almost every single condition these drugs are prescribed for, there are safer, often more effective alternatives that don't force you to pay such a devastating cognitive price. So what does this safer path look like? It's not about abandoning treatment. It's about precision. It's about choosing the right tool for the job, one that doesn't cause collateral damage to your quality of life. For an issue like overactive bladder, the first-line alternatives are often not drugs at all. They are behavioral strategies and specialized physical therapy for the pelvic floor, approaches that empower you to regain control without chemical intervention. And if a medication is still necessary, there are newer classes of drugs specifically engineered to have a low anticholinergic load, protecting your mind while treating your body. For allergies, the solution is often a simple, informed switch. Moving from an older antihistamine like diphenhydramine, which readily crosses into the brain, to a newer generation one like loratadine or fexofenadine, which are designed to stay out, can be a game changer. And for depression, where older tricyclic antidepressants were once a mainstay, modern medicine offers a wide array of options, like SSRIs, which work on entirely different neural pathways and don't carry that same cognitive price. The point is this: you are not stuck. For almost every condition treated by a high-risk anticholinergic, a safer alternative exists. It's about having the knowledge to start the conversation. However, some medications don't just cause cognitive fog as an accidental side effect. For our next class of drugs, slowing down the brain isn't an accident. It's the entire point. These are the pills prescribed for our most private struggles, the sleepless nights and the anxious days. And they represent a far more complex and insidious trap. This requires a very careful, very nuanced conversation. We're talking about benzodiazepines, medications like Xanax, Valium, and Ativan, and the related Z drugs used for sleep like Ambien. I need to be absolutely clear about this. For short-term, severe situations, a debilitating panic attack, a period of intense grief, or a brief, acute bout of insomnia, these medications can be a lifeline. They are powerful tools that offer profound relief when the brain circuits are overloaded. They work by doing exactly what they are designed to do. They calm the entire central nervous system. They apply the brakes, and sometimes that is exactly what is needed. But here is the insidious trap. The very mechanism that provides that immediate welcome calm is the same one that, over the long term, can weave a deep and persistent medication fog. Unlike the anticholinergics, where cognitive issues are an unwanted side effect, with these drugs, the cognitive slowing is a direct, intended consequence of their primary action. They work by boosting the brain's main inhibitory neurotransmitter, GABA, which is essentially the universal off switch. They don't just quiet your anxiety, they quiet everything. Your reaction time, your emotional range, and critically, the very speed at which your brain forms and retrieves memories. The danger lies in how easily a short-term crisis solution can quietly become a long-term daily habit. A prescription to help you through a few weeks of sleepless nights can, without anyone noticing, turn into a nightly ritual that lasts for a decade. And over that decade, the gentle, constant pressure on the brain's off switch takes a heavy toll. The cognitive slowing is no longer a temporary effect. It becomes your new, foggy baseline. You start feeling perpetually a step behind in conversations. Learning a new skill feels impossible. And those terrifying memory blanks become more frequent. You, your family, and even your doctor may mistake this slow, drug-induced decline for the normal process of aging. You simply assume your mind is getting older, when in reality it's being forced to operate under a constant, low-grade chemical sedation. It's not that your brain's hardware is failing or that a disease is taking hold. It's that the medication is forcing your entire operating system to run at a fraction of its intended capacity. To truly grasp what that feels like from the inside, it helps to stop thinking of your brain as a biological organ for a moment, and instead think of it as a sophisticated computer. Every morning, you wake up and it boots up, running 1,000 processes at once, seamlessly. Taking one of these sedating medications long-term is like forcing that powerful computer to run exclusively in a permanent low-power mode, the kind of mode your laptop enters to save the last 5% of its battery. What happens in that mode? The screen dims. The processor slows way down to conserve energy. You can still type, but there's a noticeable lag between hitting a key and a letter appearing on the screen. This is the cognitive slowing, that frustrating feeling of being one step behind your own thoughts. Then you try to open multiple programs at once. The computer sputters. It can't handle the load. This is the effect on your working memory, the inability to juggle a conversation while also trying to remember what you need from the grocery store. But the most frightening part is what happens when you try to access a complex, deeply stored file, a cherished memory. The computer tries, the fan whirs, but it simply doesn't have enough resources. The system hangs. The little spinning wheel appears, and then nothing. The program freezes. This is the memory blank. It's not that the file is gone. It's that the system, in its throttled, low-power state, no longer has the capacity to open it. The hardware is fine. The brain itself is not broken. But the software, the operating system that runs on its delicate chemistry, is being deliberately suppressed. And the most insidious part of this medication fog is its gradual nature. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow, methodical dimming of the screen, year after year, until the low power mode becomes your new normal. You forget what it felt like to run at full capacity. This isn't just a theoretical model. I've seen this exact process play out in real life, slowly dimming the light of a good man until his family barely recognized him. It's a story that perfectly illustrates this quiet theft of self, and it is the story of Richard. Richard was a man who spoke with his hands. For 40 years, his garage was a sanctuary of sawdust and cedar, where he turned shapeless blocks of wood into intricate birdhouses and beautiful hand-carved toys for his grandchildren. But more than that, he was a storyteller. At every family dinner, he held court, weaving tales from his youth with a twinkle in his eye that everyone loved. About 15 years ago, after a particularly stressful period at work just before his retirement, his doctor prescribed him a low-dose benzodiazepine to help with anxiety and sleep. It worked! He felt calmer, he slept better, and the prescription became a permanent part of his nightly routine. It was such a low dose, so consistent, that no one ever thought to question it. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the storyteller began to fade. The family first noticed he was quieter at dinners. The grand tales were replaced by short, simple answers. Then he started spending less time in his workshop. The tools gathered a thin layer of dust. He'd sit in his chair for hours, watching television with a vacant expression. When he'd forget a grandchild's recent accomplishment or a plan they'd made for the weekend, his wife would sigh and say, "Well, he's 78. It's just his age." His family had accepted this new, muted version of Richard as the inevitable result of getting older. They were grieving a man who was still sitting right in front of them. It was only when he had a fall and ended up seeing a geriatric specialist that someone finally looked at his full medication list with fresh eyes. The specialist immediately flagged the benzodiazepine. 15 years is a very long time, she said gently. Let's see if we can give his brain a little more room to breathe. What followed was not a simple act of stopping a pill. It was a painstaking medically supervised tapering process that took 3 full months. Abruptly stopping these drugs can be incredibly dangerous, and it required patience from everyone. For the first month, nothing changed. But then, one Sunday morning, his wife walked into the kitchen and heard a sound she hadn't heard in years, the low hum of the lathe from the garage. Richard was back in his workshop, carefully shaping a piece of maple. He looked up and smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. That evening, at dinner, he told a long, rambling, hilarious story about his first car. The twinkle was back. He wasn't just a little better. He was Richard again. The low power mode had been switched off, and the bright, vibrant man they thought they had lost to time had been there all along, trapped behind the fog. Richard's story is a profound reminder of this quiet theft. It wasn't a disease that stole his personality. It was a pill that was prescribed with the best intentions. And it makes me wonder, does any part of his story sound familiar to you? Does that slow fade, that quiet dimming, resonate with an experience you've had or one you've witnessed in someone you care about? We've now covered 2 of the biggest players in medication fog, the anticholinergics and the sedatives, and I want to pause here for a moment and just check in with you. If you feel comfortable sharing, I'd like to ask you to do something simple. Go down to the comments and just type a number. Type 1 if the discussion on anticholinergics resonated with you or someone you know. And type 2 if the story about long-term sedatives for anxiety or sleep struck a chord. You don't need to add any details. Seeing those numbers simply lets me know that this conversation is a valuable one, that we're on the right track together. Now, these first 2 drug classes, in a way, have a certain logic. One directly blocks a key memory chemical, and the other is designed to slow the entire system down. The cognitive side effects, while devastating, are almost predictable once you know the mechanism. But our third class is different. This is the one I asked you to watch for. It's a medication that, on the surface, has absolutely nothing to do with brain function. It's one of the most trusted, life-saving drugs millions take to protect their heart. And its ability to create a deep, persistent medication fog is far more subtle, and for many, far more surprising. We're talking about a group of medications that are true lifesavers, prescribed to millions to protect the heart, beta blockers. These drugs are cornerstones of modern cardiology. They lower high blood pressure, they steady a racing or irregular heartbeat, and they are critical in preventing a second heart attack. They are, without question, one of the great success stories of the last 50 years, protecting countless people from cardiovascular disease. Their role is so heroic, so established, that the idea they could be contributing to cognitive decline feels almost unthinkable. It contradicts everything we believe about them. They are prescribed to protect you, full stop. This is what makes them such a master of disguise. The medication fog they can create is subtle, often manifesting as fatigue, a lack of motivation, or vivid dreams that disrupt sleep, all of which indirectly degrade your cognitive sharpness over time. Because the drug is so obviously for the heart, neither the patient nor the doctor typically thinks to connect these vague mental symptoms back to a pill that seems to be working perfectly. They are seen as two separate, unrelated problems.
But they aren't.
The truth is, beta blockers are not all created equal. There is a hidden chemical distinction within this family of drugs, a crucial difference that determines whether the medication does its job and stays out of your brain, or if it quietly crosses that protected border, creating a fog that no one ever thinks to question. And the distinction, the absolute key to unlocking this puzzle, has nothing to do with the dose, or how long you've been taking it. It comes down to one simple chemical property that is rarely, if ever, discussed in a routine doctor's visit. The secret is whether your beta blocker is lipophilic or hydrophilic. It sounds technical, but the concept is incredibly simple. Lipophilic means fat-loving. These are the drugs that can easily dissolve in fats and oils. And what is the brain's protective gatekeeper, the blood-brain barrier, made of? A fatty membrane. Lipophilic beta blockers, like propranolol or metoprolol, two of the most prescribed medications on the planet, can essentially dissolve their way right through that security gate and enter the sensitive chemical environment of your brain. Once inside, they can cause fatigue, depression-like symptoms, and that persistent, frustrating brain fog. On the other hand, hydrophilic means water-loving. These beta blockers, like atenolol, are repelled by that fatty barrier.
They can't get in.
They do their job beautifully in the rest of the body, controlling blood pressure, protecting the heart, but they are effectively locked out of the brain. They're stopped at the gate. This is the shocking revelation. The difference between mental clarity and a persistent, life-altering fog can come down to this one simple chemical property. It's a distinction that is well established in pharmacology, yet it's often overlooked in the context of cognitive side effects. A patient suffering from medication fog from a lipophilic beta blocker could potentially have their symptoms resolved completely, not by adding another pill, but by a simple, informed switch to a hydrophilic alternative. But here is where the story takes a truly dangerous turn, and where the system can fail a patient profoundly. Because when a person on one of these lipophilic drugs reports their new symptoms, the fatigue, the low motivation, the mental slowness, what does a busy doctor often see? They don't see a side effect of a trusted heart pill. They see the classic signs of a new disease entirely: depression. And that misdiagnosis is the first domino in that devastating chain reaction we talked about, the prescribing cascade. And this is the precise moment the trap of the prescribing cascade snaps shut. The doctor isn't being malicious or lazy. They are following a pattern ingrained by years of training. The beta blocker is seen as a separate, successful treatment for the heart. These new symptoms are seen as an entirely new problem originating in the brain. The possibility that the heart medication itself is the source of the brain fog is rarely the first, or even the third thing that comes to mind. It's a classic case of medical specialization, where the cardiologist's success becomes the neurologist's new puzzle. So out comes the prescription pad. A new pill, often a type of antidepressant, is added to the regimen. It is prescribed to treat what is now believed to be a new diagnosis of depression. And just like that, the cascade is in full motion. The patient is now taking a second, powerful, mind-altering medication to treat the unrecognized side effect of the first. This is where we, as empowered patients, must learn to be skeptical. Not of our doctors, but of the process itself. We must question the relentless momentum of the cascade. Because what happens next is tragically predictable. The new antidepressant may have its own side effects. Some older antidepressants, as we've already discussed, are themselves anticholinergic, potentially adding another thicker layer to the medication fog. The patient can feel even more confused, more disconnected. They might now experience dizziness or dry mouth, which could then be misinterpreted as yet another new problem, inviting yet another prescription. The original, simple problem, a side effect from a lipophilic beta blocker, is now buried under layers of new diagnoses and new treatments. The patient is caught in a chemical quicksand, and the very system they turn to for help is inadvertently pushing them deeper. But the true tragedy is how simple the solution often is. The answer isn't found by adding another layer of chemical complexity. It's found by going back to the very beginning, by asking the one powerful question the cascade ignores. Could the first pill be the problem? Imagine the profound elegance of that solution. A careful review of the medication list. a recognition that the beta blocker is lipophilic, and then a simple, informed discussion about switching. A switch from, say, metoprolol to a hydrophilic alternative like atenolol. A change that costs nothing, adds no new risk, and preserves the vital heart protection the patient needs. And what is the result? In so many cases, the result is a quiet miracle. Over a few weeks, the fog lifts. The energy and motivation return. The depression that was so confidently diagnosed simply vanishes because it was never a disease in the first place. It was a shadow cast by another pill. The second prescription for the antidepressant is then revealed for what it always was, completely unnecessary. The entire cascade is dismantled by one single intelligent act of subtraction, not addition. This unsettling pattern, a trusted medication designed to protect the cardiovascular system, but which can inadvertently harm the very organ that system nourishes, is a paradox we see again in our next category. And this one involves a class of drugs that are arguably the most widely prescribed in the history of modern medicine, celebrated for preventing heart attacks and strokes. Yet the FDA itself has been compelled to add a specific warning to their labels about their potential to cause memory loss and confusion. This brings us to our fourth class of medication, and it is arguably the most complex on our list. We're talking about statins. Let me be absolutely clear from the outset. These are some of the most important, life-saving medications developed in the last half-century. They are a cornerstone of modern medicine for preventing heart attacks and strokes and have undoubtedly saved millions of lives. The evidence supporting their use for cardiovascular protection is overwhelming. I am not questioning their value, and this is not a recommendation to stop taking your statin. Instead, this is an invitation to hold two seemingly contradictory ideas in your mind at the same time. On one hand, we have the established fact that statins protect the brain by preserving the health of its blood vessels, shielding it from the devastating damage of a stroke. On the other hand, we have a persistent and growing body of evidence, recognized by regulatory bodies like the FDA, that for a specific subset of patients, these very same drugs can cause reversible memory loss, confusion, and cognitive fog. This is a profound and deeply confusing paradox. It feels like it defies logic. How can a medication that is so fundamentally protective of the brain's vascular health simultaneously interfere with its cognitive function? It's a question that can leave both patients and doctors feeling completely bewildered. It creates a situation where a person might be experiencing memory blanks, report them to their doctor, and neither of them would ever think to suspect the very pill that is supposed to be keeping the brain healthy. The statin, this heroic character in the story of preventing heart disease, becomes a suspect that no one wants to investigate. It feels almost like a betrayal. The fog that descends is often dismissed as just a part of aging because the alternative, that this trusted, life-saving medication could be the culprit, is too counterintuitive to consider. And yet we must consider it. Because this isn't a fringe theory or a rare anecdote. The connection is real enough that it has warranted official warnings. This forces us to confront an incredibly difficult question. Are some people being forced into a silent trade-off? A choice between protecting their heart and preserving the clarity of their mind? The answer to that question reveals one of the most ironic side effects in all of medicine. The irony is this: in a small but significant number of people, the very act of lowering cholesterol body-wide can starve the brain of a resource it desperately needs to function. This isn't just a collection of patient anecdotes. In 2012, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, officially mandated that the labels of all statin medications include a warning about potential, generally reversible cognitive side effects like memory loss and confusion. The evidence was too compelling to ignore. While the exact biological mechanism isn't perfectly understood, the leading theory is beautifully and tragically simple. Your brain is the most fat-rich organ in your body. About 25% of your body's total cholesterol is found in your brain. It's not an enemy there. It is a vital, non-negotiable building block for the membranes of every single brain cell and for the protective myelin sheath that insulates your nerves, allowing them to fire signals at lightning speed. So here is the cruel paradox. The very substance you are meticulously working to reduce in your arteries is a non-negotiable component for the health of the very organ those arteries feed. By trying to protect the brain's plumbing, you might inadvertently be removing a key raw material needed for the brain's structure and function. The medication fog that descends isn't a sign of disease. It can be the sound of a construction site that has run out of bricks. The messages get lost. The memories can't be retrieved because the physical infrastructure for thought is being subtly compromised. This creates what feels like an impossible dilemma. Do you protect your heart from a future attack, or do you protect your mind from this creeping fog today? It feels like a choice between your life and yourself. But this is not a dead end. So let me be perfectly clear. The solution to this agonizing dilemma is not to stop taking your statin. That would be trading one potential risk for another, far more certain one. You do not have to choose between protecting your heart and protecting your mind. The answer is not a radical act of stopping, but a precise act of switching. Just as we saw with beta blockers, the key is hidden in the drug's chemical properties. Statins, too, are either lipophilic, fat-loving, or hydrophilic, water-loving. The most commonly prescribed lipophilic statins, like simvastatin and atorvastatin, can easily pass through the fatty blood-brain barrier and may interfere with the brain's delicate cholesterol balance. But the hydrophilic statins, specifically pravastatin and rosuvastatin, are engineered differently. They're designed to do their work in the liver and the bloodstream, and they're largely blocked from ever entering the brain. The superior solution, the one that resolves this entire paradox, is often a simple, informed conversation with your doctor about switching from a lipophilic statin to a hydrophilic one. This is, bar none, the most elegant solution because it achieves both goals simultaneously. It allows you to maintain the vital, life-saving cardiovascular protection while removing the chemical agent that may be causing the medication fog. This is the opposite of the prescribing cascade. It isn't adding another pill to treat a side effect. It is an act of intelligent substitution. It is a single move that can restore cognitive clarity without compromising physical health. It empowers you to sidestep the terrible choice between your memory and your lifespan. Instead of accepting the fog as an unavoidable price for a healthy heart, you can have both. Doctor, I'm experiencing some memory issues. I've learned that the statin I'm on is lipophilic. Could switching to a hydrophilic option like pravastatin or rosuvastatin be a safe and effective alternative for me? For these 4 classes of medication we've discussed, the anticholinergics, the sedatives, the beta blockers, and the statins, there is often a clear, evidence-based path to a solution. An intelligent switch, a careful tapering process, a different choice. The fog can be lifted. But this brings us to our 5th and final category. This is the one I asked you to watch for at the beginning, because here, the choices are not so elegant or clear. Here, we enter a much more challenging territory, a place where the medication and the condition it treats are locked in a tragic embrace. We're now moving to the most difficult catch-22 of all, the one faced by millions living with chronic pain. Here, the medication fog isn't just a side effect, it's a symptom of a much deeper, more tragic conflict. We're talking about certain kinds of painkillers, specifically opioid medications, but also, and this is critically important, the drugs often prescribed for nerve pain, like gabapentin and pregabalin. With the other medications we've discussed, the path forward, while not always easy, is at least clear. But here, the situation is profoundly more complex. Because for the person living with severe chronic pain, the disease itself is a cognitive thief. Constant grinding pain is exhausting. It shatters concentration. It disrupts sleep. It blankets the mind in its own kind of fog. And the powerful medications we use to fight that pain, the opioids that dull the signals, the gabapentinoids that quiet the nerves, they also, by their very nature, quiet the mind. They are central nervous system depressants. Their job is to slow things down. This creates the most brutal dilemma in all of medicine. It presents a choice between 2 kinds of suffering. It forces a person to ask, must I live with this physical agony to keep my mind clear? Or must I sacrifice my mental clarity to find relief from the pain? This isn't just a side effect, it's a fundamental conflict embedded in the very nature of the treatment. It's a cruel catch-22, forcing a choice between 2 unbearable states, a body in agony or a mind lost in a fog. This is the brutal paradox at the heart of managing chronic pain. Here is the key devastating fact that is so often unspoken in a doctor's office. The disease and the treatment can produce the exact same soul-crushing symptom. We have mountains of evidence showing that long-term unmanaged pain itself is toxic to the brain. It physically shrinks the regions responsible for memory and executive function. The constant biological stress of being in pain literally degrades your cognitive abilities over time. So a person living with severe arthritis or neuropathy is already starting from a cognitive deficit, already living in a fog created by their condition. Then we introduce the treatment. We prescribe a medication designed to turn down the volume on the nervous system. And what happens? A second, chemically induced fog rolls in and settles on top of the first. The patient now finds themselves in an impossible position. The pain itself is making them confused and forgetful, but the medication that brings them relief from that pain also makes them confused and forgetful. They are trapped. To escape the physical agony, they must accept the mental cloudiness. To regain their mental clarity, they must endure the physical agony. There is no clean win. Every single day becomes a negotiation, a trade-off between the body and the mind. It is the very definition of a catch-22, a problem for which the only solution is denied by a circumstance inherent in the problem itself. This creates a profound sense of frustration and helplessness that is hard for anyone who hasn't experienced it to truly understand. It feels like you are being forced to choose which part of yourself you are willing to sacrifice just to get through the day. And unlike the other medications we've discussed, there isn't always an elegant switch to a safer alternative. The path forward here is far more difficult, far more personal, and requires a level of care and collaboration that our system is often not designed to provide. I could tell you a story here. I could describe a patient, let's call him Robert, a retired contractor with debilitating spinal stenosis, and I could walk you through his agonizing choice between the clarity of his mind and the relentless pain in his back. I could detail the conversations with his wife as she watched his personality flatten, his memory dull, under the very medications that allowed him to walk to the kitchen. But for this one category, I'm not going to. And the reason is this: to tell a single story would be a profound disservice to the reality of the situation. It would frame this as an isolated case, a unique tragedy. But the link between long-term use of these powerful painkillers and cognitive decline is not an anecdote. It is a well-documented, widely accepted, and deeply researched conclusion in the medical literature. This isn't a surprising side effect that we are just now discovering. It is a known expected outcome. The cognitive price of long-term opioid or gabapentinoid use is a feature of the treatment, not a bug. The research isn't subtle, it is overwhelming. We know these drugs can impair attention, slow processing speed, and damage executive function. Reducing this vast, complex, and painful reality to one person's story would be like trying to describe an entire ocean by showing you a single drop of water. It minimizes the scale of the challenge that millions of people face every single day. The truth is, if you are living with chronic pain or you care for someone who is, you don't need me to tell you a story. You are already living inside of it. So we have now walked through the 5 key culprits of medication fog, from the hidden to the obvious, from the easily solvable to the profoundly complex. And I know that hearing all of this at once can feel overwhelming. It can feel like you're navigating a minefield. The most important question is not just what these problems are, but what do you do now? How do you take this knowledge and turn it into meaningful action that protects you? You do not do it by panicking. You do it by having a plan. You do it by opening a very specific, very strategic conversation. So what does that strategic conversation actually look like? The most important first step is understanding what it is not. It is not about walking into your doctor's office and announcing you're stopping a medication. That can be incredibly dangerous. I need to be absolutely clear, you do not stop or change any medication on your own, ever. The goal here is not confrontation, it is collaboration. It's about taking this knowledge and using it to transform your role from a passive patient into an active partner in your own healthcare. At the start of this video, I promised you a tool to turn that helpless feeling into agency. And that is exactly what I am going to give you now. This isn't just advice, it's a practical framework. A protocol. I'm going to give you the 5 empowering questions to take with you to your next appointment with your doctor or your pharmacist. I want you to think of this as your script for that conversation. These questions are meticulously crafted to open the right doors, to bypass the easy answer of, it's just your age, and to get to the heart of whether medication fog could be affecting you. So I genuinely encourage you, pause for a moment if you need to, and get a piece of paper and a pen, or open the Notes app on your phone. Write these down. Because these aren't just questions, they're keys. Each one is designed to unlock a specific part of the discussion and to guide you and your doctor toward the clarity you deserve. Let's begin with the first one. First, the opening question, the one that sets the stage for the entire conversation. Question 1. Could any of my current medications be contributing to the memory symptoms I'm experiencing? This is the master key. The wording here is intentional and strategic. It is open-ended, non-accusatory, and deeply collaborative. Notice it doesn't say, "Doctor, your prescription is hurting my brain." That language can put a physician on the defensive. Instead, it says, "Let's investigate this possibility together." It frames your symptoms, the memory blanks, the fog, as the central problem, and your medications as just one potential variable. This invites your doctor to become a detective alongside you, to look at the full picture with fresh eyes. This question respectfully introduces the entire concept of medication fog into the clinical conversation, perhaps for the very first time. It is the perfect starting point because it doesn't challenge your doctor's authority, it invites their expertise. It takes the abstract fear we've been discussing and turns it into a concrete clinical question that a good physician should be more than willing to explore. It sets a new agenda for the appointment, shifting the focus from simply adding a new diagnosis to thoughtfully reviewing the existing treatments. Once you've opened the door, the next step is to take a full inventory. Question 2. Can we schedule a brown bag review to go over every single medication I'm taking, prescriptions, over-the-counters, and supplements, to confirm if each one is still absolutely necessary? This question is a powerful tool for pushing back against medical inertia. The phrase brown bag review is common language in geriatric medicine and signals to your doctor that you're thinking systemically about your health. It is the single most effective way to start dismantling a potential prescribing cascade. So often, medications are added over years for various reasons, but they are rarely reevaluated as a whole interconnected system. A pill prescribed for a temporary issue 10 years ago can easily and thoughtlessly become a permanent fixture on your list. This question forces a crucial pause. It asks your doctor to justify each medication's continued place in your regimen based on your health today, not your health a decade ago. It also introduces the vital concept of deprescribing, the planned, supervised process of subtracting medications that may be causing more harm than good. It changes the goal from simply managing diseases to actively improving your quality of life. Next, you move from the general inventory to a specific line of inquiry. Question 3. For this specific medication, and here you name the drug you're concerned about, are there any alternative treatments or different drugs in the same class that have a lower risk of cognitive side effects? This is where you demonstrate that you are an informed and engaged partner in your own care. This question shows you aren't just identifying a problem, you're proactively seeking a solution. This is where you can bring up the knowledge you've gained today. For my blood pressure medication, metoprolol, I've read it's lipophilic. Are there any hydrophilic alternatives like atenolol that might be a better fit for me now? Or for my statin, could we discuss if switching to a hydrophilic option like pravastatin might help with my brain fog? This question is incredibly empowering because it provides your doctor with a clear, specific action to consider. It's not a demand, it's a request for their expert opinion on a well-researched alternative. It shows you respect their knowledge while also clearly advocating for the preservation of your own cognitive health. The fourth question drills down on one of the most important principles we've discussed. Question 4. Given my current age and my latest kidney function tests, is it possible that my current dose is now too high for me even though it was right in the past? This question directly addresses the core concept of our aging metabolism. It is a brilliant and deeply respectful way to ask if the dose is kept up with your body's natural changes. It acknowledges that the perfect dose at 60 may be a mild, chronic overdose at 75 because your body's clearing crew works at a different pace. This question shows you understand that your physiology is not static. It avoids any implication that the doctor made a mistake in the past. Instead, it frames the issue as a necessary and intelligent adjustment for the present. It invites your doctor to recalculate the risk-to-benefit math based on your current health data, your age, your weight, and the results of your most recent blood tests. It is a precise, evidence-based question that prompts a thoughtful reevaluation of the fundamentals of your prescription. And finally, the fifth question, which is your crucial safety net. Question 5. If we do decide to change or stop a medication, what is our specific step-by-step plan for tapering it safely? This final question is arguably the most important one on the list because it prevents a dangerous mistake from being made in the name of progress. As we discussed with Richard's story, stopping certain medications abruptly, especially sedatives, certain antidepressants, or even beta blockers, can be incredibly harmful, causing severe withdrawal symptoms. This question demonstrates your understanding of that risk. It communicates that you are a responsible patient who wants to follow a safe, medically supervised protocol. It puts the onus on your doctor to provide a clear, written-down plan, what dose to take, for how long, what withdrawal symptoms to watch for, and when to follow up. It ensures that the process of lifting the medication fog is done carefully and methodically, preventing any unintended harm along the way. It is the question that ensures the solution doesn't accidentally create a brand new problem. These 5 questions are your framework. They are your script for turning fear into a productive partnership. Now, I know what many of you might be thinking. Dr. Dean, this sounds great in theory, but I'm worried about how my doctor will react. What if they get defensive? What if they just dismiss me and say it's all in my head or just part of getting old? That is a deeply valid concern. And how your doctor responds to these very reasonable questions is in itself a powerful diagnostic tool. It tells you everything you need to know about whether you have a true partner in your health or just a prescriber of pills. Let me be perfectly clear about this. A good physician, a true partner in your health, will welcome these questions. They will see your preparation not as a challenge to their authority, but as a sign of your engagement. They became doctors to solve complex problems, and you're bringing them a crucial piece of the puzzle they might have missed. They will see you as a valuable collaborator in the single most important project there is, your quality of life. But what if they don't? What if they become defensive? What if they wave a hand and say, "Oh, that's very unlikely," without truly investigating? Well, what if you hear the single most disempowering phrase in all of medicine? Well, what do you expect? It's just your age. That response is not a dead end. It is a red flag. It is a bright, clear signal that your doctor may be operating from an outdated playbook, one that sees aging as a simple, inevitable decline rather than a complex process that deserves thoughtful, individualized care. A dismissive answer is not a reflection on you or the validity of your questions. It is a sign that you may need a second opinion, perhaps from a physician who specializes in this very area, a geriatrician. Because this conversation, this entire investigation into medication fog, isn't just about side effects or prescriptions. It's about a fundamental question of what we want from our healthcare as we age. It forces us to define what we are truly trying to preserve. Is it just the body, the beating heart and the breathing lungs, or is it the person who inhabits that body? This fundamental question is the most important one we can ask because it defines the entire purpose of our medical journey after 60. The goal of medicine, when viewed through the longevity lens, is not just to keep the biological machine running. It is to preserve the consciousness, the personality, the unique collection of stories and memories that we call a self. It is to protect the person operating the machine. Your memories are not data points on a chart. Your personality is not an acceptable loss in the column of side effects. Your connection to the people you love is the ultimate measure of a life well lived. And any medical approach that doesn't hold that as its central, non-negotiable truth is an approach that has lost its way. We have become so focused on a medicine that finds things, a new problem, a new number to fix, a new pill to add, that we've sometimes lost sight of a medicine that helps you live well. The fear you feel during a memory blank is not a fear of cellular decay. It is the fear of losing your story. It's the terror of the library of your life having its books slowly, silently removed from the shelves. And the ultimate goal of good medicine is to be the librarian that helps you protect that collection, not the force that inadvertently damages it. It must be about extending not just the timeline, but the richness and clarity of the narrative that unfolds along that timeline. This is why we must have these difficult conversations. It is why we must be willing to question a prescription, to ask for a review, to advocate for our own cognitive health with the same urgency we advocate for our hearts or our bones. Because a treatment that saves your body but erases yourself is not a medical victory. It is a profound and tragic failure in its most important mission. It is an act that preserves the vessel but loses the treasure it was meant to carry. This way of thinking, this relentless focus on the whole person and their quality of life, is the very heart of the longevity lens. It is a perspective we believe is essential for navigating a system that can sometimes prioritize numbers over lived experience. It is a commitment to ensuring that your later years are not just longer, but are lived with the full vibrancy of who you are. If this conversation today has empowered you to look at your health through that longevity lens, to prioritize the person, not just the problem, then I invite you to join us by subscribing to Keystone Health. It's a simple click, but it's a commitment to a new way of thinking about your health. Our commitment to you is straightforward. We will never offer you hype or quick fixes. Instead, we provide the evidence, the context, and the confidence you need to become the single most effective advocate for your own well-being. It's about translating complex medical science into practical knowledge that turns confusion into clarity and fear into focused, productive action. We post a new, deeply researched video every single week, each one designed to help you navigate the complexities of the modern medical system and make choices that align with your goals for a vibrant, engaged life. Subscribing is an act of self-advocacy. It ensures you'll have these tools for your own journey. But true empowerment is not something we achieve in isolation. This channel is a community, a place where shared experience builds collective wisdom. The insights we gain are most powerful when they ripple outwards, creating a network of support. In that spirit of helping one another navigate this journey, I have one final important request that will strengthen this community and help the next person who finds this video feeling lost and alone. At the start of our conversation, I invited you to share a simple yes if you've ever felt that chilling moment of a memory blank. Now, I'd like to ask you to return to that comment section one last time. Think back over everything we've uncovered together. The subtle danger of the prescribing cascade, the simple act of naming the medication fog, the 5 classes of drugs hiding in plain sight, and the 5 questions that can turn fear into action. What was the single most valuable piece of this puzzle for you? Was it the surprising distinction between lipophilic and hydrophilic drugs? Was it finally having a name for a process you've seen but couldn't explain? Or was it simply the profound relief in realizing that a memory blank isn't automatically a dementia diagnosis? Please take a moment to share that one insight. Your reason for sharing is not for my benefit. It's for the person who will find this video next week, consumed by that same isolating fear you once felt. They will be searching the comments, desperate for a single ray of hope, and your comment might be the exact piece of evidence they need to see. It might be the key that encourages them to start their own conversation, to ask their own questions. By sharing what you've learned, you leave a light on for the next traveler on this path. You turn your knowledge into a shared resource, strengthening everyone. In this community, we don't just learn for ourselves, we share to empower each other. Thank you for being a part of that. After seeing how easily a medication fog can mimic dementia, what's the one conversation you now feel you must have? Tell me in the comments. I read and reply to everyone. That was just one cognitive symptom. In the next video, we tackle another, when a common word is on the tip of your tongue but won't come out. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss it, and share this with someone who needs this.